A widower found a widow at an auction and gave her a home the same day. The sun had barely risen over the dusty hills when John stood on the edge of his porch, staring at the morning light spilling across his ranch. He had lived here alone for almost 3 years since his wife Mary had passed away after a long illness. The ranch had once been full of laughter, the clatter of horses' hooves, and the soft hum of Mary's singing as she moved from the kitchen to the garden. Now it was quiet, too quiet. The wind whispered through the fences, and the cattle stirred softly in their pens. But there was no laughter, no warmth, no one to share the long, empty hours with. John sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. He loved this land, had worked it with his own hands for decades, but the quiet had begun to feel like a weight pressing down on his chest. He missed Mary's touch, her gentle voice in the evenings, and the way she always knew when he needed a kind word. Sometimes when he was alone in the barn, brushing down the saddles or fixing the fence posts, he imagined her there, smiling at him, telling him not to work too hard, not to worry so much. The thought brought both comfort and sadness. After breakfast he saddled his old horse Daisy, a gentle mare with patient eyes, and rode out to check on the northern fence line. The sun was climbing higher, and the breeze carried the familiar scent of dry grass and earth. John loved these mornings, when the world seemed untouched by the noise and chaos of towns and cities. Yet even in this serene landscape, loneliness could find him. Every sound reminded him of absence. The creak of the barn door, the soft rustle of the leaves, the distant calls of birds, but no one to answer them, no one to share the day with. Later, while mending a broken fence post near the creek, John's thoughts wandered. His neighbor Tom had mentioned an estate auction happening in the town next week. Tom had said it might be interesting, a gathering of people and maybe something more. John had barely paid attention at first. Auctions were not usually his scene. He preferred quiet and routine. But something about Tom's words lingered. The idea of seeing people, hearing voices, and perhaps noticing someone who might understand the loneliness of losing a spouse was strange, but appealing. The next few days passed slowly. John went about his work, feeding the cattle, fixing fences, and maintaining the house, but the thought of the auction lingered in the back of his mind. By the time Saturday arrived, he found himself preparing his horse and heading into town. He wore a hat pulled low to shield his eyes from the sun, dusty boots, and a coat he hadn't worn in months. The town itself was busy, small but lively. Children ran along the sidewalks, merchants called out their wares, and the chatter of people filled the air. When he entered the auction hall, he paused for a moment, taking in the scene. Tables were lined with furniture, antiques, and small household items, each holding a story of its own. People whispered and laughed, placing their bids quietly at first, then more boldly as the auctioneer called out. John moved slowly among the tables, his eyes scanning the items, noting the worn wooden chairs, delicate porcelain vases, and dusty photo frames that held memories of lives once lived. There was a warmth in this chaos, a sense of life continuing, and for the first time in weeks he felt a spark of interest beyond the routine of his ranch. Then he noticed her. She was sitting quietly in the corner, slightly apart from the crowd. Her hair was neatly tied back, and her eyes held a quiet strength, though there was a sadness in the way she looked at the items around her. She did not smile or laugh. She did not call out or push to the front. She seemed cautious, careful, as if the world had taught her to measure her steps and her words. John could not explain why, but something about her drew his attention. Perhaps it was her calm, steady presence, or the sense that she, too, carried a story of loss. As the auction began, the woman placed a bid on a small wooden chest, hesitating before raising her hand. John watched as her fingers trembled slightly. He could sense her uncertainty, the fear that she might not win, that someone else would claim the item. Something inside him stirred. He remembered his own feeling of emptiness after Mary's passing, the longing for connection, the desire to offer care and support to someone else. He stepped forward quietly, placing a bid on the chest so that it would belong to her. She looked up in surprise, a flicker of gratitude crossing her face. John nodded slightly, a gesture of quiet reassurance. She returned the nod, her eyes softening just a little. When the bidding was over and the auction hall began to empty, John found himself walking toward her. "I'm John," he said simply, tipping his hat. "Looks like that chest is yours." She smiled faintly. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I'm Clara." No small talk, no awkwardness. Just two people who had known loss, meeting for the first time and recognizing a shared understanding. John noticed the way Clara's hands held the chest gently, as if it were more than a box of old belongings, as if it carried pieces of her past she was not ready to leave behind. "Do you live in town?" John asked, unsure why he cared about the answer. Clara shook her head. "Not exactly," she said. I don't really have anywhere to stay." "I was hoping to find some help," the words struck him. There was no hesitation, no shame, just honesty. She needed help. And John, whose life had been quiet for far too long, felt something awaken in him. Compassion, yes, but something more subtle. A desire to offer safety, warmth, and the comfort of home. "Would you like to see my place?" he asked impulsively. "It's not far from here. And it's quiet, peaceful. You can stay as long as you need." Clara hesitated for a moment, her eyes studying him, measuring trust in the space of a heartbeat. Then she nodded. "I think I would," she said. They walked together to his horse, the sound of their steps echoing softly against the wooden floor of the auction hall. Outside, the wind carried the scent of dust and earth, a reminder of the world beyond the town and perhaps the promise of something different, something new. John led Daisy to Clara, helping her mount carefully, and then they rode side by side toward his ranch. Neither spoke much, but the silence was not uncomfortable. It was filled with possibility, with the gentle awareness of two lives intersecting at just the right moment. As they approached the ranch, John explained the layout: the small house, the barn, the creek where he often fished. Clara listened, her eyes taking in the landscape, the soft rolling hills, the familiar warmth of home. She noticed the care in the way he spoke of the land, of the animals, of the routines that had structured his life. It was simple, yet inviting. It spoke of stability, of quiet strength, and of the kind of kindness that came without expectation. When they reached the porch, John dismounted and helped Clara down. She looked around, taking in the small house with its neatly kept garden, the smell of fresh bread and earth in the air, and the gentle hum of life continuing despite absence and loss. He could see her shoulders relax slightly, the tension of uncertainty easing just a little. "I thank you," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I wasn't sure where I would go." "You don't have to worry about that anymore," John replied. "You have a place here, at least for now. We'll figure out the rest together." There was a pause, a quiet moment where the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the yard. Two people, each carrying the weight of loss, stood side by side, beginning a journey neither had expected. The day had started like any other, filled with routine and solitude, but it ended with the warmth of connection, the first spark of companionship in years. For John, it was the beginning of opening his heart again. For Clara, it was a relief, a safe place after months of uncertainty. Neither knew what the future held, but they both felt the comfort of not being alone anymore, even for a single day. As evening settled over the ranch, John led Clara inside, showing her the small room he had prepared. She unpacked her few belongings, placing them carefully in the drawers, arranging her new home with thoughtful attention. The room was modest, but it was hers now, a space where she could breathe, reflect, and perhaps begin again. They shared a simple dinner at the kitchen table, the clinking of dishes and the warmth of shared food bridging the gap between strangers and companions. Words were few, but the presence of each other was enough. John noticed how she laughed softly at a small joke, how her eyes brightened when she spoke of something familiar from her past, and he felt a quiet hope rise within him. That night, as John sat on the porch alone for a moment, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky, he thought about how unexpected life could be. One moment he was tending to his ranch, lost in memories and silence. The next, he had met someone who needed him as much as he needed them. It was strange, and yet it felt right. The ranch was still quiet, but the quiet no longer felt empty. It felt alive, waiting for what tomorrow might bring. The morning sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, casting soft patterns across the wooden floor. Clara stirred awake, stretching slowly as she realized she was no longer in a strange hotel or a borrowed room in town. She was in a small, warm room that smelled faintly of bread, wood, and the clean, earthy scent of the ranch. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of safety and quiet comfort. She dressed quickly in the simple clothes John had set out for her the day before, noting the care he had taken to make her feel at home. A small window overlooked the barn and the distant hills, and she could see Daisy, the old mare, grazing quietly. The ranch was alive in a calm, understated way, far from the noise and bustle of town, yet filled with gentle movement and life. Clara stepped out of the room and into the small kitchen. John was already there, tending to a pot on the stove. The smell of eggs and freshly baked bread filled the air. He looked up as she entered, a faint smile touching his weathered face. "Good morning," he said simply. "Sleep well?"
"Yes," she replied softly.
"It's quiet here. I think I slept better than I have in a long time." John nodded, stirring the eggs. "It's peaceful. That's one thing about this place. You hear the wind, the cattle, the creek, but nothing else. It can be a comfort or a challenge, depending on your mood." Clara offered a small smile. "I think today it's a comfort." They ate breakfast in companionable silence, the soft clatter of dishes punctuating the morning. Clara noticed small details, the neatness of the kitchen, the way John had prepared the table, the simple but inviting arrangement of flowers in a jar on the windowsill. It was clear he had lived alone for some time, yet had a quiet sense of order and care. After breakfast, John suggested they take a walk around the ranch. Clara followed him outside, feeling the warmth of the sun and the gentle sway of the tall grass beneath her boots. He led her past the barn, pointing out the cattle, the small vegetable garden he tended, and the creek where he often fished in the early mornings. "This place, it's beautiful," Clara said, her voice soft. "I can see why you've stayed here all these years." John shrugged lightly. "It's home. And it's been mine for a long time. I never imagined I'd have company again. Not like this." He looked at her with quiet honesty. "But I'm glad you're here. Somehow it feels right." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest. There was no pressure, no expectation, just the gentle acknowledgement of someone who had also experienced loss and understood the value of small gestures and simple trust. As they walked toward the barn, Clara noticed the small repairs John had made recently, a gate held together with new hinges, a fence line reinforced with fresh posts, and the barn itself, sturdy and weathered, yet cared for. John spoke quietly about the work, explaining how he had built the fences and the barns himself, how he learned about caring for the cattle and maintaining the land from his father and grandfather. Clara listened, fascinated not just by his skill but by the dedication and pride in his voice. When they reached the barn, John gestured toward Daisy. "She's gentle, but she knows who she trusts. You can feed her if you like. She'll remember you." Clara stepped forward cautiously, extending a hand. Daisy sniffed her fingers and then nuzzled her gently. Clara laughed softly, a sound that felt foreign to her after months of uncertainty and travel. The simple act of caring for the horse, brushing her mane and offering fresh water felt grounding, like the first step in reclaiming a part of herself she had lost. After tending to Daisy, John suggested they check the fields near the northern fence. They walked slowly, speaking of mundane things, how the cattle were doing, the weather, and stories from the past that brought smiles to their faces. With each story, each shared laugh, Clara felt the heavy weight of her past grief lighten just slightly. It was not gone, but it was no longer as oppressive. As the morning stretched into afternoon, John and Clara returned to the porch. John had prepared a simple lunch, bread, cheese, and fresh fruit from the small garden. They ate together, talking quietly about their lives, not pushing, not prying, but allowing space for honesty and shared understanding. Clara noticed the care John had put into preparing the food, the way he had set the table, and the way he seemed to anticipate small comforts she might need. It was a kind of attention she had almost forgotten existed. After lunch, John suggested they work on a small project together. The northern fence had a section that needed reinforcement, and he thought it would be easier with two people. Clara agreed, feeling a sense of purpose that had been absent in her life for months. They worked side by side, hammering posts, tying wires, and adjusting the wooden rails. At first, their conversation was practical and simple: how to tie the knots, how to lift the posts, and where the reinforcements were needed. But slowly, it shifted to stories of their pasts, memories of spouses lost, of the small joys and comforts they had once known, of the resilience it took to keep going each day. John shared a story about Mary, how she loved the roses that grew by the kitchen window, how she would insist on planting a few more each spring, even when he thought they didn't need them. Clara shared memories of her late husband, how he had always made her laugh, even in difficult times, and how she missed the simple routines they shared. They laughed softly at the similarities and nodded in understanding at the sorrows. It was the first time in months that Clara had felt understood, and John felt a gentle opening in his own heart, a reminder that companionship could still exist even after deep loss. As the afternoon sun began to dip low, they paused to rest, leaning against the fence and watching the cattle graze in the fading light. There was a quiet peace in the air, a sense of accomplishment not just in the work done, but in the connection formed. Clara looked at John, realizing how comfortable she felt in his presence. There was no pressure, no expectation, only the warmth of shared effort and quiet companionship. "Thank you," Clara said softly, breaking the silence. "For today, for all of this. I didn't know what to expect when I came here, but it's more than I could have hoped for." John smiled, his eyes reflecting the orange glow of the setting sun. "I didn't expect it either. But sometimes the right people show up at the right time." "I'm glad you're here." They returned to the house as the sun sank below the hills. Clara helped set the table for dinner, arranging the food John had prepared with careful attention. It was a small act, but one that made her feel included, needed, and appreciated. John noticed the subtle changes in her demeanor, the way she moved more freely, the way her smile came more easily, the way her eyes reflected the soft light of the evening. After dinner, they sat together on the porch, drinking tea and watching the stars appear in the clear night sky. The world was quiet except for the gentle sounds of the ranch, the lowing of a distant cow, the soft rustle of leaves, the whisper of the wind. Clara felt a calm she had not experienced in months, a sense that perhaps she had found a place where she could breathe and begin to heal. John spoke softly, almost to himself, about how life could surprise people, how a day that seemed ordinary could become extraordinary through small acts of kindness, through connections formed when least expected. Clara listened, her heart lighter, feeling the truth in his words. She realized that she was beginning to trust again, beginning to feel that life could hold hope and warmth even after loss. That night, as they prepared for bed, Clara lingered for a moment by the window, looking out over the ranch. She thought about the auction, about the moment John had invited her into his home, about the simple gestures of care and kindness that had defined her first day at the ranch. It was a beginning, not a conclusion, but it felt like the first step toward something new and meaningful. John paused in the doorway, watching her quietly. He did not intrude, only observed with a quiet understanding. He too felt the subtle shift in his life, the awareness that opening his home and heart to Clara had brought a spark of life he had not known in years. The night was calm, and for the first time in a long while, both of them slept without the heavy weight of loneliness pressing down. The ranch was peaceful, the world around them quiet, but within the walls of the small home, something had begun. Trust, warmth, connection. These small threads wove quietly between them, forming the beginnings of a companionship neither had expected, but both welcomed with cautious, hopeful hearts. And so, the first full day together ended not with grand gestures or dramatic events, but with quiet understanding, shared work, gentle laughter, and the simple knowledge that two people who had known loss could begin again side by side in the calm of a small ranch under a sky full of stars. The next morning arrived with a soft golden light spilling over the hills. and Clara woke feeling more at ease than she had in weeks. The bed she slept in was firm but comfortable, and the warmth of the small room made her feel safe. She dressed quietly, careful not to disturb John, who had already begun preparing breakfast in the kitchen. The smell of sizzling bacon and fresh bread reached her from the other room, carrying with it a sense of normalcy she hadn't experienced in months. When Clara stepped into the kitchen, John looked up and offered a warm, familiar smile. "Good morning," he said, placing a plate of bread and eggs on the table. "Coffee?" "Yes, please," Clara replied, feeling a little nervous as she sat down. I don't know how to thank you for yesterday. It was more than I could have imagined." John shrugged, stirring his coffee slowly. "It wasn't anything special. Just life happens. And sometimes you do what feels right. It's simple, really." Clara nodded, but inside she knew it was more than simple. It was rare to be treated with such care and consideration, without expectation or judgment. She took a bite of the warm bread, feeling the comfort of a simple shared meal. After breakfast, John suggested they take a walk toward the old orchard at the edge of the property. The trees were heavy with fruit, some ripe and ready to be picked. Clara agreed, feeling a sense of curiosity and eagerness to learn more about the ranch, more about John, and perhaps more about herself in this new place. As they walked along the winding path to the orchard, John spoke casually about the land. "This orchard was planted by my father," he said. "He loved these trees, believed each one had a story. Some of them are old enough to remember my grandfather tending them." Clara listened, fascinated by the care and history behind each tree. She reached out to touch the rough bark of one of the older trees, imagining the hands that had planted and pruned it decades ago. John watched her quietly, noting how she seemed to appreciate the simplicity of the life he had built. When they reached the orchard, John handed her a basket. "Help me pick some fruit," he suggested. "The apples are ripe, and the pears are almost ready. It's good work, and it keeps your mind busy." Clara smiled and began picking apples from the lower branches, placing them gently in the basket. She felt a sense of accomplishment with each fruit she collected. John worked beside her, reaching for higher branches, carefully selecting the best fruits. They worked in companionable silence for a while, the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional chirp of a bird the only sounds around them. Eventually, Clara broke the quiet. "It's peaceful here," she said softly. "I didn't realize life could be like this. Quiet, steady, with small tasks that matter." John nodded. "It's easy to forget that. Life isn't always about big events or dramatic changes. Sometimes it's the small, steady moments that make the difference. That's how you heal, how you move forward." Clara felt a warmth in her chest at his words. She had spent so much time feeling lost and uncertain. But now, in this quiet orchard with the sun on her face and the scent of ripe fruit in the air, she felt a sense of hope. Perhaps she could rebuild her life, piece by piece, alongside someone who understood the quiet strength it took to survive. After the orchard, they returned to the barn to care for the animals. Clara learned how to groom the horses properly, feed the chickens, and ensure the cattle were comfortable and safe. John guided her patiently, offering gentle corrections and encouragement. She appreciated the way he explained each task, never rushing, never judging. She realized that life here was full of responsibility, but it was rewarding. Each small task mattered, and each task connected her more deeply to the land and to John. As the day wore on, John suggested they fix a broken gate near the back of the property. It had been damaged during a recent storm, and he wanted Clara to help reinforce it. At first, she hesitated, unsure of her strength, but John offered encouragement. "It's not about how strong you are," he said. "It's about patience and knowing how to work with what you have." Together they worked on the gate, hammering posts into the ground, tightening hinges, and ensuring it was secure. Their hands occasionally brushed, and they shared small smiles and quiet laughter. There was no rush, no urgency, only the slow rhythm of work and companionship. With each nail hammered and each board adjusted, Clara felt a growing sense of accomplishment and belonging. At mid-afternoon they paused to rest. John fetched 2 glasses of water, handing one to Clara. They sat on the grass, watching the sun move slowly across the sky. Clara leaned back, feeling the warmth of the sun and the gentle breeze. She looked at John and realized she had not felt this relaxed in a long time. Not since before her husband passed away. The weight of grief and uncertainty had eased, replaced by a sense of calm and trust. "You've built a beautiful life here," Clara said quietly. "I didn't know people could still find peace like this, after everything." John looked at her, his eyes reflecting a quiet honesty. "It took time, and it wasn't easy. There were days I didn't think I'd get through alone. But life finds a way to keep going. And sometimes it brings people together when they need each other the most."
Claire nodded, feeling the truth in his words.
She realized that she had come to the ranch unsure of where she would sleep, what she would eat, or even if she could trust anyone again. Yet, in less than 2 days, she felt a connection she had thought lost forever. A bond formed not through grand gestures, but through quiet kindness, shared work, and understanding. Later in the afternoon, John suggested they prepare a small garden bed for new vegetables. Clara eagerly agreed, enjoying the feel of soil between her fingers and the satisfaction of planting seeds that would grow into something nourishing. They worked together, side by side, laughing when dirt fell where it shouldn't, or when a stubborn weed refused to come out. Each small task brought them closer, not just as two people working together, but as two souls beginning to understand the value of companionship. As the sun began to lower in the sky, Clara and John gathered the tools and returned them to the barn. They moved slowly, enjoying the quiet moments between tasks. The ranch seemed alive around them, full of sound and movement, yet calm and steady. Clara realized that she had never felt so at peace in months, and the thought made her heart swell with gratitude. That evening they shared another simple meal, sitting at the kitchen table and talking about memories from the past, small hopes for the future, and the events of the day. Clara noticed how easy it was to talk with John, how natural it felt to share stories without fear of judgment. He listened attentively, asking gentle questions, encouraging her to speak, and sharing his own experiences in turn. After dinner they sat on the porch again, drinking tea and watching the stars appear. The world was quiet, the ranch calm, and the night sky vast and full of promise. Clara felt a sense of belonging she hadn't known in a long time. She realized that the simple acts of kindness, patience, and understanding from John were changing her, helping her heal from the loss she had carried for so long. John spoke softly about the importance of connection, of finding people who understand your past but do not define your future. Clara listened, feeling the weight of his words and the sincerity in his voice. For the first time, she imagined a future that was not dictated by grief or loneliness, but by trust, companionship, and shared experiences. As night deepened, Clara prepared for bed, reflecting on the day. She had arrived at the ranch unsure, cautious, and uncertain about what the future held. Now she felt a quiet hope, a sense that life could offer comfort and warmth again. The presence of John, the rhythm of the ranch, and the simple tasks they shared had created a space where she could begin to feel safe and at home once more. John paused in the doorway, watching her settle in. He did not speak, only offered a reassuring smile. He too felt the subtle changes, the small moments that hinted at a new beginning. The day had been ordinary in many ways. Work in the orchard, fixing fences, preparing meals, but in its simplicity it had built trust, understanding, and connection. The night was calm, filled with the soft sounds of the ranch settling into sleep. Clara lay in bed, listening to the distant lowing of the cattle and the gentle rustle of leaves in the wind. She realized she had not felt this at peace in a long time. Tomorrow there would be more work, more small tasks, and more shared moments. But for now she felt a sense of hope and belonging. The next morning arrived bright and clear, with sunlight glinting off the leaves and the morning dew sparkling across the grass. Clara woke to the sounds of the ranch, the soft lowing of the cattle, the gentle rustle of the trees, and the occasional neigh of Daisy in the barn. She felt a quiet sense of belonging that had not been there the day before, as if the ranch itself had accepted her. She dressed quickly and stepped outside, breathing in the crisp morning air, feeling alive in a way she hadn't in a long time. John was already outside repairing a small section of fence that had sagged over the winter. His hands worked efficiently, but he paused when he saw her approach, giving her a small nod. "Morning," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Good morning," Clara replied. "What are you working on?" "The old fence by the creek," John explained. "A few of the posts are loose. I figured we could fix it together." Clara smiled and followed him to the work site. The broken fence stretched along the edge of the creek, and John handed her a hammer and some nails. She had never done this kind of work before, but John guided her patiently, showing her how to hold the tools, how to align the posts, and how to tighten the boards. As they worked, they talked quietly, sharing stories of their lives and reflecting on the small things that had shaped them. Clara told John about her childhood, about the days spent in her mother's garden, and the simple joy she found in planting flowers. John listened, occasionally offering a story of his own, about his father teaching him how to care for the land, or how he and Mary had built parts of the ranch together. The work was hard, and the sun climbed higher, but neither of them complained. They laughed softly when mistakes were made, a crooked post, a misplaced nail, and encouraged each other when tasks felt heavy. There was a rhythm to their movements, a quiet understanding that came from working side by side. Each shared effort strengthened their connection, not just as neighbors or companions, but as two people learning to trust and care for each other again. After a while, they paused for water and rested under the shade of a large oak tree. Clara took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun and the gentle breeze. She realized how much she had missed this kind of day. Productive, peaceful, and filled with the kind of companionship that didn't demand anything but presence. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice carrying a hint of emotion, "for letting me help and for everything. I didn't expect to feel this welcome so quickly." John looked at her and shrugged lightly. "It's easy to feel welcome when someone wants to be part of your life. You didn't just show up. You stepped in, and that makes a difference." They finished the fence together, stepping back to admire their work. The posts were straight, the boards secure, and the fence now sturdy enough to keep the cattle safe. Clara felt a quiet pride, a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt in a long time. John noticed the light in her eyes, the small smile that lingered, and he felt a gentle warmth in his chest. The afternoon passed with more small tasks around the ranch. Clara helped water the garden, picking ripe vegetables and arranging them carefully in a basket. She learned to feed the chickens, collect eggs, and even mend small tears in the barn roof with John's guidance. Each task was simple, yet meaningful, and each action drew them closer together. During a break, they sat on the porch, watching the cattle graze in the distance. Clara picked up a small sketchbook she had brought with her, something she hadn't touched in months, and began to draw the orchard, the barn, and the fields surrounding the ranch. John watched quietly, noticing the concentration in her eyes, the care with which she captured the simple beauty of the place. "You're very good at that," he said softly. Clara smiled, a little shyly. "I haven't drawn in a long time. Life gets busy, I guess. But being here, it's peaceful. I can think again." John nodded, understanding completely. It's important to have moments like that. Time to breathe. Time to remember who you are beyond loss and work. This place, it gives people that if they let it. As evening approached, they prepared a simple dinner together. Clara chopped vegetables while John cooked the meat, moving easily around the kitchen, sharing small jokes and observations. The meal was modest, but it felt special because they had prepared it together, and because it was part of the rhythm of their shared day. After dinner, they cleaned up together, washing dishes and drying them with care. Clara felt a sense of satisfaction in the small routines, the quiet teamwork that brought them closer without words. John watched her, noticing the way she moved, the way her expression softened when she laughed, and he realized that these simple shared moments were building a bond stronger than either had expected. Later, they stepped outside to the porch where the sky was painted in shades of orange and pink. The air was warm, carrying the faint scent of the orchard and the distant creek. Clara and John sat quietly, sipping tea and watching the day slowly turn into night. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding and a sense of connection that words could not fully capture. Clara broke the silence gently. I didn't realize that being with someone again could feel easy, not awkward or forced, just right. It takes time, and it takes trust. But sometimes you find someone who understands without needing to be told everything. It's rare, but it's worth it when it happens. She looked at him, seeing the quiet honesty in his eyes. There was no pressure, no expectation, only the genuine desire to share life in a simple, meaningful way. Clara realized she had felt that connection today, not just through conversation, but through shared work, shared meals, and shared laughter. As night deepened, the ranch grew quiet. The cattle settled in their pens, the wind whispered through the trees, and the stars appeared one by one in the clear sky. Clara felt a sense of calm wash over her. For the first time in months she felt she could rest, that the weight of her past grief was lighter, and that a small spark of hope had been rekindled. John walked her to her room, making sure she had everything she needed for the night. "Good night, Clara," he said softly. "Sleep well. Tomorrow will bring more work, but also more quiet moments like today, and I hope you'll enjoy them."
"I think I will," she replied, her voice gentle. "Thank you."
"For everything." "I don't think I would have made it here alone." John nodded, understanding her words without needing to elaborate. He turned and walked back to his own room, leaving the door slightly open as a gesture of safety and welcome. Clara lay in bed thinking about the day, the hard work, the laughter, the quiet understanding, and the feeling of being seen and appreciated. She realized that this ranch, this man, and this new way of life were offering her something she had thought impossible, the chance to heal, to trust, and to begin again. The next morning promised more tasks, more shared routines, and more moments to grow closer. Clara knew that the journey ahead would not be without challenges, but she felt ready to face them, not alone, but with John by her side. The ranch had become more than a home. It had become a place of connection, hope, and new beginnings. And so, as the night deepened and the stars shone brightly over the hills, Clara and John slept quietly in their respective rooms, each carrying the quiet knowledge that their lives had changed in small, meaningful ways. The bond they were building was not instant or dramatic, but steady, real, and deeply human. The ranch, with its fields, animals, and simple routines, had become a place of healing. And in the heart of it all, two people who had known loss were beginning to find warmth, trust, and companionship once more. The morning air was crisp as Clara stepped outside, feeling the gentle warmth of the sun on her face. Birds chirped from the trees, and the distant creek sparkled in the early light. She took a deep breath, enjoying the calm, peaceful rhythm of the ranch. Life here had started to feel normal again, not the kind of normal filled with emptiness or fear, but a steady, comfortable rhythm she could finally trust. John was already outside, checking the water troughs and feeding the chickens. When he saw her, he gave a small wave and a smile that warmed her heart. Clara returned it, feeling a quiet excitement for the day ahead. There was work to do, yes, but there was also the simple joy of being together in a place that now felt like home. "Morning," John said as she approached. "Sleep well?" "Yes," she replied, smiling. "I feel rested." It's nice to wake up here, where the day begins slowly, not with rush or worry. John nodded, appreciating the moment. That's what this place can do. It helps you breathe, think, and sometimes remember what matters. After breakfast, they decided to take a walk along the creek. The path was familiar now, lined with wildflowers and soft grass. They walked side by side, occasionally stopping to point out small things. A frog leaping into the water, a bird's nest tucked into the branches, the sunlight glinting off the creek's surface. Clara felt a sense of wonder she hadn't experienced in months. Every detail of the ranch, every sound and smell seemed alive and comforting. They paused on a small wooden bridge that crossed the creek. John leaned on the railing, watching the water ripple below, while Clara stood beside him, taking in the beauty of the quiet morning. "I never realized how much I missed this," she said softly. "Simple things, Like the water, the birds, the wind, they mean so much more than I remembered. John glanced at her, his eyes soft. It's easy to forget when life becomes complicated or sad. But these small things, they remind you that life continues, and that you can still find happiness, even after loss. Clara nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She realized that her time at the ranch had given her more than just safety and shelter. It had given her hope, a chance to reconnect with herself and with someone who cared without asking for anything in return. After their walk, John suggested they repair the old barn door, which had been loose for some time. Clara agreed, eager to help. Together they worked with steady hands, hammering, adjusting, and tightening the door until it swung smoothly. Their hands brushed occasionally, and they shared quiet smiles and laughter over small mistakes or moments of clumsiness. Each shared task, each small moment of connection, built trust and deepened their bond. By afternoon they rested on the porch, drinking water and watching the cattle graze in the sunlit fields. Clara felt the warmth of the day on her face, the peacefulness of the ranch surrounding her. She looked at John and noticed the care in his expression, the way he observed the land, the animals, and her with quiet attention. She realized that she felt safe with him, more than she had in months, perhaps even years. "I never thought I'd feel like this again," Clara said softly, her voice carrying a hint of emotion. "At home, safe, and not alone." John nodded, his gaze steady. Life doesn't always make sense, but sometimes it gives you a second chance.
Not everyone gets that, but I think we have one.
Clara smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't known in a long time.
She realized that in John she had found someone who understood grief and loneliness, someone who could offer comfort without expecting anything in return. And in her, John had found companionship, a presence that softened the edges of his long years of solitude. Later they decided to work in the garden, planting new vegetables and tending the existing crops. Clara handled the delicate seedlings with care, while John worked on digging and preparing the soil. They talked quietly about hopes for the next season, about small dreams and plans for the future. The work was tiring, but it felt rewarding. Each plant they set in the earth was a small symbol of growth, renewal, and the life they were beginning to share. As the sun began to lower in the sky, John and Clara finished their work and rested under a large oak tree, the shadows growing long across the fields. The quiet of the ranch, combined with the gentle companionship they had built, created a sense of peace that neither had expected. Clara thought about how much had changed in just a few days, from uncertainty and fear to trust, comfort, and hope. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft, almost a whisper, "for giving me this place, and for believing in me, even before I believed in myself."
It wasn't about believing in anyone, he said. It was about doing what felt right.
Sometimes that's enough to start something new, and I think we both needed that. The evening brought more simple routines, preparing dinner together, sharing stories, and laughing over small, everyday moments. Clara noticed the subtle ways John cared for her, the way he made sure she had a comfortable chair, the way he offered her water after work, and the quiet patience he showed as she learned new tasks. It was not grand gestures or dramatic moments that mattered. It was the consistency, the attention to detail, and the shared life that created trust and warmth. After dinner, they sat on the porch once again, watching the stars appear one by one in the clear night sky. Clara felt a sense of wonder at the vastness above, but also a deep sense of gratitude for the small, grounding moments here on earth. She realized that life could be gentle, kind, and steady, even after heartbreak and loss. John spoke quietly about hope, about the small things that can change a person's life.
"It doesn't have to be dramatic," he said.
"It's the little things, sharing work, a meal, a laugh, that make life worth living again." Clara listened, feeling the weight of his words and the sincerity in his voice. She realized that her fear of being alone, of never finding trust or comfort again, was slowly fading. She had found a place where she belonged, and someone who made her feel valued, respected, and safe. As the night deepened, They retreated to their rooms. Clara lingered by her window for a moment, looking out over the quiet fields, the gentle sway of trees, and the distant creek. She thought about the auction, about the day she had met John, and about the unexpected turn her life had taken. What had started as uncertainty and fear had blossomed into hope, trust, and a sense of home. John, too, sat on the porch for a moment before bed, watching the stars and thinking about the days they had spent together. He felt a gentle warmth in his chest, a quiet happiness that had been missing from his life for years. Clara had brought light into the ranch, into his home, and into his life. He understood that the days ahead would continue to build on this foundation, quiet, steady, and filled with care. The following morning they began another day with small tasks, tending the animals, repairing fences, and preparing the garden for new planting. Each moment, each shared effort strengthened their bond. Clara felt more confident in her role at the ranch, more connected to the land, and more at ease with John's presence. She realized that she could trust him fully, and that he respected her independence while offering gentle support. By the afternoon, they had completed all their chores and settled on the porch to rest. Clara looked at John, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and connection. "I never imagined I could feel this way again," she said softly. "Safe, cared for, like I belong somewhere." John smiled, his eyes reflecting the sunlight. "You do belong here, Clara. And not just in the house or on the ranch, but here, with me. We've both known loss, both felt lonely. But now we have a chance to share life again." Clara's heart swelled with emotion. She realized that in just a few short days, her life had changed completely. What had started as fear and uncertainty had grown into trust, companionship, and a quiet, steady happiness. She felt seen, valued, and understood, a feeling she hadn't experienced since before her husband passed. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, John and Clara shared a quiet dinner, laughing softly over small stories and memories. The ranch was calm, the world peaceful, and the night full of possibilities. They had found each other unexpectedly, yet the bond they shared felt natural, comforting, and enduring. As night fell, they sat together on the porch one last time, sipping tea and watching the stars appear. The air was filled with the gentle sounds of the ranch settling into rest, the soft rustle of leaves, the distant lowing of cattle, and the quiet whispers of the wind. Clara felt a sense of peace she had not known in a long time, and she realized that she had found more than just a home. She had found trust, companionship, and hope for the future. John watched her quietly, understanding that life had brought them together for a reason. The journey ahead would have its challenges, but with trust, patience, and care, they could face anything. For the first time in years, both of them felt a quiet certainty that their lives had changed, that companionship and care could exist again, and that home was no longer just a place, it was the people you shared it with.